As soon as we can. So welcome everybody to the virtual Dark Sky Festival 2020. Normally this time of the year I'd be panicking in the early afternoon getting ready for this year would have been our 9th annual Dark Sky Festival, but we've had issues with COVID-19, and just about 2 weeks ago, a decision was made that we would attempt to do a virtual one. And that's, we're still working some of the bugs out of our system here, so please be patient with us. This afternoon, our first presentation is being presented by Ms. Caitlin Boulanger, who is the Interpretation Coordinator for Wood Buffalo National Park in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. And her presentation is Wood Buffalo's Creatures of the Night. And if I hear anybody yell out, "Damn it, Janet," they're going to get muted, booted out. I thought there was I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I love the reference to Creatures of the Night. So basically it's a virtual tour with Caitlin, and we'll discover what creatures lurk in the dark within Wood Buffalo National Park, which is also the world's largest dark sky preserve, thus tying it into why it's part of our Dark Sky Festival. And as you tag along, you'll discover why these creatures deserve protection, not only environmentally, but from light pollution and other things that is promoted by the principles of dark sky preserves. Now, I'd ask anybody, if you do have questions for Caitlin, that we wait until the end of the presentation, or if you want to get them in right away, so you don't forget what they are, there is a chat option on the bottom of your screen, and you can type in your answer, and after the presentation, Caitlin will attempt to answer them. And well, I know she'll answer them. She knows everything. So
I wouldn't say everything.
Without further ado, Caitlin, I turn it over to you. So I am muting myself so you guys won't hear me cursing and swearing about YouTube.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. Again, my name is Caitlin. I'm the Interpretation Coordinator here at Wood Buffalo National Park. Just before we get into our virtual tour, I'm going to share a screen with you about, it's a website called Mentimeter, which we will be using later on in the presentation. So this is, we're going to do some bat trivia after our virtual tour. So the website is up at the top of the screen here, menti.com. And then we have a code there that is 2876029. And this is an interactive way for us to have some trivia later on. I will bring the screen back up after the tour, but I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that if you want to participate, this is how you'll do that for that portion of the program today. All right, so without further ado, let's start our virtual hike. Hold on one second. So now that we've learned about Hi there, bonjour, welcome to Wood Buffalo National Park. My name is Caitlin and I will be your guide for today. Before we begin, I would like to start by acknowledging that we are on Treaty 8 territory and the traditional territory of the Salt River First Nation and the Smith's Landing First Nation and the Fort Smith Métis. Now, today we're at Pine Lake here in Wood Buffalo National Park at our dark sky observation site. So this is typically where the Dark Sky Festival takes place. But today we're coming to you virtually from the site. So we're going to talk about some of the night sky's most interesting creatures. But before we get to that part, I want to start off by talking about why we're a dark sky preserve and why that's important. So Wood Buffalo National Park is Canada's largest national park, but it's also the largest dark sky preserve in the entire world. So in 2013, we were designated as a dark sky preserve. And so this is important not only for astronomy and observing the night sky, but it's also really important for conservation in terms of our nocturnal creatures that are found here in the park. Some of these creatures include things like bats, which we'll talk about more today. So the reason why being a dark sky preserve is so important to our nocturnal species here at Wood Buffalo is because areas with light pollution can often impact these species negatively. So in ways that happens is it can impact their foraging grounds, it can impact their migration routes and their routes for which they feed, which can lead them to starvation. And even in some cases it can impact them coming out of their roost after hibernation. In some cases, some bats particularly will become entombed in their roosts, so they won't come out after hibernation because of the light pollution. So here at Wood Buffalo, we don't have light pollution, so our nocturnal species are super happy. So let's talk about bats, the superheroes of the night sky. What are your thoughts about bats? Some people can find them scary or icky or gross, but that's because there's a lot of misinformation and false information about bats out there. So why are bats so important as a species? Well, the Earth would be a much different, much poorer place without bats. Bats are so useful and so good for so many things, including being natural pest control. So you may see some mosquitoes buzzing around me today as we do our tour. They'll eat those guys for us. They eat damaging agricultural pests, but also in some other places in the world, they often eat fruit and pollinate different plants and drop seeds along the way in tropical places. In the rainforest part of the world, they're often helpful in restoration of rainforests by dropping these seeds as they fly along after eating fruit and different things of that nature. The Chinese view bats as symbols of good luck and happiness, and some North American indigenous peoples believe that bats are winged gods who make nature cycles run properly. The Navajos believe that as creatures of the nights, they share a special link between the gods and people. So let's continue on with some cool bat facts. So bats are nocturnal animals, but what does that really mean? Well, that means when you and I are going to sleep at night, the bats are just getting up and starting their day. Bats will often hunt a couple times throughout the night, usually first when they first wake up, right after dusk, and then they will hunt again right in the early morning before the sun comes up. Bats in Canada are insectivores, so that means that they strictly eat bugs. So we don't have any vampire bats in Canada, we don't have any fruit-eating bats, they just eat bugs. So by doing this, they'll fly perhaps treetop to treetop to eat some bugs, or they may fly out over open water to eat the bugs, and they can eat bugs that are either in flight or stationary. So they can eat these mosquitoes that are pestering around me while they're flying around, or if there's a bug perched on a tree branch or something like that, they can scoop that up too. Awesome. So bats are actually pretty similar to humans in a lot of ways. You might ask me, well, how is that? Bats actually have a wing structure that is very similar to the structure of the human hand. So they actually have fingers very similar to what we do, but they have that webbed kind of skin in between to help with their wings. They also have a piece of skin that goes from kind of their wrist down to their body to help with their wings as well. And their thumbs actually have a claw on them that help them to climb up different structures, trees, poles, different things of that nature. Now, bats actually can't land on the ground very well because they can't walk. So the way that their body is made up and the way that their feet work, it's easier for them to land in trees, on branches and things like that so that they can take off. And when they're ready to take off and go for a flight, they climb to the top of the tree. This is so they can get to the highest point for their takeoff to go for a flight. So another way that bats are like humans is when mama bats give birth to baby bats, they usually give birth to just one baby. Sometimes they can have more than that, maybe one or two, but typically it's just one. And the baby bats, which are called pups, often eat the mother's milk until they're ready to fly and feed on their own. So yeah, they hang out with their mom until they're ready to go, kind of like humans and other animal species as well. So bats are super neat because they also hibernate in the winter. So we have bats here at Wood Buffalo that both hibernate here in the park, typically in caves, which we call hibernacula, or there's different bats that migrate. So they'll migrate south because they don't hibernate, or they hibernate in trees and they need a warmer environment. So throughout the park, you can find caves in different areas that are bat hibernacula. We also have other species that hibernate in these hibernaculas, such as the red-sided garter snake. So caves can be a really neat place to find really neat animals.
Honestly,
During hibernation, it's normal for bats to wake up at least once a month, typically to drink water and to go to the washroom, because that's a long time to sleep without going to the bathroom. And they can change their body temperature. So they can go from having, you know, a regular body temperature during the normal part of the year when they're out flying and being active, to having a body temperature of just 2 to 6 degrees Celsius. So they're actually able to control their own internal body temperature, which is pretty cool and pretty unique. Wow, look at all the bison tracks that are here. Bison are one of the largest land mammals in Canada, and we have the largest free-roaming herd of wood bison. And yeah, some pass through here, and you can see their hoof marks. It's pretty neat. So I'm sure you've heard the expression blind as a bat, but did you know that that's actually not true? Bats can actually see just as well as you and I can, but they still use echolocation at night to help them see where they're going. So why do they need to use echolocation then if they can see just as good as we can? Well, just like you and I, we can see perfectly fine during the day, but when it's dark out, we have a harder time seeing. So bats use echolocation to judge the distance between themselves and an object. So that can be their food, like bugs, or it could be a building or a tree, things of that nature. But what exactly is echolocation? Well, essentially, it's when a bat creates a sound, it bounces off an object, and then it comes back to the bat, and they can hear that and help them judge the distance of the object. So the thing about echolocation, though, is that the pitch of their call is so high pitched that humans actually can't even hear it. But there's this really neat thing called a bat meter or an echo meter that can help humans pick up on bat calls at night to see if there's bats around. But because we can't hear them doesn't mean that the bats can't hear them. So actually, in order to stop themselves from becoming deaf or losing their hearing because of how loud their calls are, they actually, for a couple milliseconds, disconnect something in their ear. Then they make their call for echolocation and then quickly reconnect the thing in their ear so that way they can hear the sound when it comes back. That's pretty darn neat, and it just happens. All right, so now we're gonna quickly talk about what species of bats that can be found here in Wood Buffalo National Park. Just have to share a different screen. Oops. Nope. Nope. Okay. So we have several different species of bats that call Wood Buffalo National Park home. So the first species of these bats I'm going to speak about briefly is the big brown bat. So the big brown bat, as you can see, has a wingspan of about 32 to 39 centimeters. And they can live for about 20 years, typically around 18, but some of them can live about 20 plus. These bats, they hibernate. So they will stay here in the park in caves and hibernacula, as mentioned in the video previous. And they are dark brown with a pale underside, and they have more rounded ears, as you can see in the picture. Next, we have the red bat. So red bats have a wingspan of about 29 to 33 centimeters, and their lifespan is shorter, much shorter. So it's about 10 to 12 years. And this is one of the migratory species of bats. So they spend their summers here in Wood Buffalo National Park, but they travel down to Mexico for the winter because they either don't hibernate or they hibernate in trees, and it would get way too cold for them in the park. They have an orange-red coat and white back, and their chest and shoulders are also white. And they're pretty hairy with rounded ears and with a black border. The next is the silver-haired bat. So these bats have a wingspan of about 26 to 31 centimeters. They live pretty similar lifespan as a red bat, so about 12 years. These are also migratory bats. So they spend their time here in the park, but they also migrate down to around South Carolina. So they have a black coat with silver tips, and they have ears that are as long as they are wide, and they're black with a pink base. So you can kind of see that there in that photo. This is the hoary bat. So this bat is one of the larger ones. So it's 34 to 42 centimeters of wingspan, but their lifespan is extremely short in comparison to some of the other bats that call wood buffalo home. So their lifespan is only about 2 years. They're also migratory towards the southern US, and they have a light brown coat with ash tips and a yellow band across their throat. And their ears are short and round with a well-defined border. The little brown bat, probably one of the bats we hear about the most. I personally, the one I hear about the most. It has a wingspan of about 25 to 27 centimeters. Again, these bats live fairly long as well, about 20 years, and they hibernate, so they would stay here in the park. They have a glossy olive to black coat, and their ears are triangular. And on a Canada-wide scale, they are endangered. The northern myotis. So this bat actually used to be called the northern long-eared myotis, but for some reason they've differentiated between the northern myotis and the northern long-eared myotis. The wingspan of these bats are about 23 to 26 centimeters. They also have a lifespan of around 20 years, and they also hibernate in the park. These guys have a dark brown back with pale underside, similar to that of the little brown bat, but has much longer ears. They are also endangered. And those are the bat species that we have in wood buffalo. So give me 1 second here. And we'll continue on with our tour. So now that we've learned about the bats that call Wood Buffalo National Park home, let's chat about what threats are facing bats in Canada today. So the #1 threat for bats currently in Canada is white nose syndrome. And this is a disease that is affecting bat colonies across the country and can be very detrimental to bat populations. Another threat to bats include habitat loss and habitat changes, so things like urban development, so creating cities or expanding cities, agricultural development, so creating fields and changing things that way, and of course deforestation in Canada as well as other places in the world. Another threat to bats is pesticide use. So because bats, especially in Canada, are insectivores and strictly eat bugs, the use of pesticides and insecticides can be detrimental to their health. This is because they eat the bugs, so they also ingest those chemicals. Finally, the last threat to bats that we're going to talk about briefly is the disturbance of their hibernacula or maternity colonies. So this is when things like their caves are disrupted, where the mother bats are roosting to have their babies and things of that nature. So now that we've learned all about bats today, I would like to end our presentation in closing with a story. As I mentioned, I'd like to close today with sharing a story. So this is an Ojibwa oral story on how the bats came to be. So early one morning, while he was on his way to his home in the sky, Father Sun got caught in the branches of a tall tree. He tried and tried to free himself, but only managed to entangle himself more firmly. Soon, Father Sun could not move at all. That morning, all the animals waited in vain for Father Sun. When he did not appear, they went quietly back to their beds. They thought that they had not slept enough and that it was still night. The bear went back to his cave. The rabbit returned to his nest under a bush at the edge of a field of sweet clover. The chipmunk went into his hole in the roots of an oak tree. Only the owl, the wolf, and the fox were happy, for they could hunt a little longer than usual in the dark. When Father Sun did not appear the next day, the animals began to suspect that he had gotten lost on his way home. They searched through most of the forest but could not find him. One little squirrel always looked at the treetops because he liked to jump from branch to branch. He discovered Father Sun stuck in the topmost branches of a tall tree. By this time, Father Sun was very pale and weak. Little squirrel, he rasped in a low voice. Little squirrel, set me free." "Certainly, Father Sun," replied the little squirrel. He ran up the trunk of the tree towards the topmost branch, but Father Sun's heat drove him back to the ground at once. Again, Father Sun called out, little squirrel, set me free, set me free." "Oh, Father Sun, you're too hot," said the little squirrel sadly. "You have already burnt my fine long tail." He had always considered his tail very handsome and was sorry that it was gone. "Try again," pleaded Father Sun. "I am so tired that my light will soon go out." The little squirrel ran up the trunk of the tree for a second time. He almost reached Father Sun before the fierce heat drove him back. As the squirrel reached the ground once more, Father Sun groaned. Little squirrel, please try one more time." "Father Sun," cried the squirrel, "your heat has burnt off my long tail. My fur is black. What is more, I can't see. Your light has made me blind." "Please, little squirrel, try again," whispered Father Sun. "My light will soon go out." Once more, the little squirrel ran up the trunk, this time as fast as he could go. When he reached the top branches of the tree, he gave Father Sun a tremendous push. At that moment, Father Sun broke free and sailed up towards his home in the heavens. The squirrel held on to its branches with all his might. The intense heat made his arms grow longer and his skin stretch out. Now it seemed that he was caught at the top of the tree forever. There was no one that could rescue him. His scorched skin hurt and his eyes were so sore that he could not see at all. Father Sun paused and looked back. He was distressed to see how much he had harmed the kind squirrel, and knew that somehow he must help the little creature. "Poor little squirrel," he said, "in helping me you have been hurt. Now I shall repay your kindness. What is your dearest wish?" "I have always wanted to fly," the squirrel answered. "But no, it is too late. I am blind and my skin hurts so much that I must surely die." Father Sun nodded and suddenly the pain left the squirrel, but he still could not see and his skin and arms were still stretched. "From now on," Father Sun said, "you will be able to fly into the heavens just as you have always wanted to do. Since my light hurt your eyes, you will fly at night. Although your eyes are blind, your ears are still ever sharp. When you call out, the trees and rocks will send back echoes to you. Then you will know that there is something in your way and you will be able to dive and swoop to avoid hurting yourself. I shall see you in the morning and in the evening on my journey back and forth." The squirrel dropped his arms from the branch and flew away. He had become a little brown bat. Ever afterwards, he would hang upside down when he slept in the daytime. Then everyone would remember the day that the squirrel saved Father Sun so that the world could have light and warmth. And that is how a squirrel became a little brown bat. All right. So now, typically during our night hike that we deliver for the Dark Sky Festival, we include a bat trivia aspect of the program. So now I'm going to share the next screen, and we're going to use a website called Mentimeter to do our bat trivia virtually. So I hope this works well. So if you would like to participate in the bat trivia, you can go to menti.com, which is the website displayed at the top of this slide. And you can use the code 2876029 to log in. And you'll be able to participate in bat trivia. So I'll give those who want to participate a second or two to do so, and then we'll get started. And the website and the code will remain displayed at the top throughout the trivia. So if you change your mind or if you lose it for whatever reason, you can always go back and join again. Okay. Okay, so we have 3 players. Excellent. So the question is, what is the world's smallest bat? And your choices are bumblebee bat, pallid bat, or the flying fox. All right. So 2 people got the correct answer. And we have a leaderboard because, of course, it's trivia. Excellent. So the world's smallest bat, the bumblebee bat, is the world's smallest bat, and it's also the world's smallest mammal. So it is only about 1 inch long and weighs only 2 grams. The eastern small-footed bat is the smallest bat in Canada and also the rarest species in the country. So our next question . Where are bats found in Canada? So only in Ontario, Quebec, and BC, in every Canadian province and territory, or only along the coasts? All right, all 3 got that one. Perfect. So bats are the most widely distributed mammal in the entire world. They inhabit every region of Earth except for the Antarctic. In Canada, they have been recorded in all provinces and territories, and some species like the red bat have gone as far north as the Southampton Island in the Canadian Arctic. Okay, question 3 of 5. What do Canadian bats love to eat? Insects, fruit, or maple syrup? Awesome, yeah, that's correct. So insects. We've got a tight race for first place. So all bats that are native to Canada are insectivores, meaning that they only eat insects. So during a single night hunting for food, they will typically devour half their weight in insects. In other parts of the world, some bats also eat fruit. They serve as pollinators, and some feed on animal blood, which is where we get the term vampire bats. Question number 4. True or false, vampire bats are found in Canada? False. Excellent. So there are no vampire bats in Canada. As mentioned in the last slide, all species in Canada are insectivores. Only 3 species of bats feed on blood, and those that do typically live in tropical habitats. Vampire bats feed on small amounts of blood of cows, pigs, horses, and birds. And finally, our last question. Bats are found in several Parks Canada sites. What do you think Parks Canada is doing to help bats? Protect their breeding and hibernation sites, monitor their health, sharing information with the public about bats. All of the above. So all of the above is correct. So lots of things. I know here in Wood Buffalo, our resource conservation department does bat surveys pretty much annually to protect their habitat and monitor their health of the colonies here in the park. We do programs like this where we share information with the public to kind of help some of the stigma that was talked about in our virtual hike of bats being scary or being an maybe not a so nice or so cool species. So just promoting how really cool that these mammals are. And then we can also talk about things that everyday people can do for bats. So things like putting up a bat house and stuff like that. That's the end of our trivia. Thank you for playing. Who's the winner? Looks like Larry. Excellent. Thank you everyone who participated in the trivia. It's the first time that I've used this software to do that, so excellent. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. That is the end of my programming for today. So I do want to thank everyone for participating and listening to what I had to say about bats and for participating in our trivia. If there are any questions, now is the time. If you have any burning questions, you can either unmute yourself and ask out loud, or you can use the chat function as well.
Yeah, it's Larry here. I'm just wondering, where do you get a bat meter and how much are they?
Yeah, so there are different types available and you can buy them online. I forget the one website off the top of my head right now, but there's one, it's like a little square thing that you can plug in either your iPhone or your iPad and can use it through an app. But there's also like handheld devices that are like the bat meter on its own. And they are fairly expensive pieces of equipment, a couple $100s to $1,000, I think, about $1,000 for the top end. But yeah, they can be found on different websites online. Sorry, I don't know one off the top of my head right now. Leah asked in the chat, what is the biggest bat in the world? So if you remember back to the question about the smallest bat in the world, one of the options was the flying fox. And the flying fox is the biggest bat in the world. And it's got a wingspan of about 1.5 meters. So it's a very big bat. So Leah just let me know as well, she's actually my coworker, that you can get a bat meter from Wildlife Acoustics, and it's around $200 for that one. Why does the one bat have such a short life? That's a great question that I unfortunately do not know the answer to. I can look into it, but I don't know, and I should look into it because it is very different from the other bats that we have in the park. Are there any other questions? Okay. Again, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today and for joining the virtual Dark Sky Festival. This is something new, I think, for a lot of us, and it's a great way for us to get together and do these kinds of things.
There, I'll unmute myself before I start flapping my lips about. Thank you, Caitlin. It was a very informative presentation. Unfortunately, I'm still working on the YouTube glitching, so hopefully for our next series of our presentation this evening and future ones, we will be broadcasting them on YouTube. And this one here has been recorded, so we should be able to actually have it available on our YouTube channel for people to watch. And if you want more info on the YouTube channel, there's a quick link on the TABIS website. I ramble off what the link is, but it's a whole bunch of letters, numbers, capital letters, and yeah. Halfway through it, I'd screw it up. So thank you for everybody who's joined. It's a good learning experience for us, and hopefully it just gets better and bigger as we move on from this presentation. And again, Caitlin, thank you very much for a very informative and entertaining presentation.
Thanks for having us, Mike.